Hello, and thank you for joining us. The webinar will begin in about 1 minute. We're just going to give everyone a chance to log in. Thanks. Hello, and thank you for joining us. We're going to begin the presentation in about 30 seconds. We're just going to give everyone a chance to log in before we start. Thank you for your patience. All right, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Miro Consulting webinar on 7 reasons to avoid IBM's Authorized SAM Provider Program, or also known as IASP. My name is Sean Donahue, and I'm the VP of Marketing and Lead Salesforce Analyst at Miro Consulting, and I'll be your monitor for today's event. Presenting today will be Sharon Tremblay, Miro's Senior Analyst and IBM Practice Leader. If you have any questions during the broadcast, please use the question box, and we'll answer them at the end of the session. We'll take the questions in the order that it's received, and don't worry if we don't have time to get to your question. We will contact you after the webinar. The questions are anonymous. We'll be the only ones who see your questions, and we'll read your question aloud before we answer, but we won't read any names of anyone who asked them. So you can feel free to ask with anonymity. We are not an IBM partner, so we have no obligations to IBM. We don't report anything to IBM. We're completely independent of them. All right, before we begin, I'd just like to explain who Miro is. We are a leading global provider of software asset management and subscription management services for Oracle, Microsoft, IBM, Adobe, and Salesforce. We specialize in license management, audit advisory, negotiation tactics, support management, and cloud services. Our mission is to help our clients maximize their ROI on software license and subscription investments, stay in compliance, and successfully negotiate contracts and audit settlements. With that, I will turn it over to Sharon to begin today's presentation. Sharon, take it away.
Sure. Just a quick agenda. We're going to talk about IBM's Authorized SAM Partner Program, the potential dangers of it, how you can get an exception to using ILMT, and some recent tool announcements that IBM has said could be used in lieu of ILMT, of course, with a written exception. So what is IBM's Authorized SAM Partnership? They announced this in 2019. They invited 4 companies to participate in the program. Out of those 4 companies chosen for this program, 2 are companies that have previously been hired by IBM to perform their software audits, which is Deloitte and KPMG. They won't allow any IBM software resellers into the program to keep that from being a conflict of interest. And I guess the biggest selling point of this is while you're in this program with one of their partners, you will not be audited by IBM for software unless you fail to work with their partner during the contract. I don't know how they're pricing it as an ongoing managed service, but about 5 years ago, we heard that IBM pays Deloitte and KPMG $250,000 per audit. So it might be in that per year, especially since it's an ongoing program. It could grow over time. So what this partner is supposed to do is they're supposed to deal with you directly without IBM getting involved. They'll be working for you. So if you hire, let's say Deloitte, there will be an agreement directly between you and Deloitte, and you're going to have an NDA in place with them. But however, once you go through the initial assessment, the SAM provider should notify IBM that you're in this program, so you don't accidentally get an audit letter. And this engagement should start off with their managed service by assessing all your IBM software deployments regardless of licensing metrics. It's not just PVUs, it's going to be users too, and all the other metrics that IBM has. And they're going to create like an audit, a current license position, and you're going to have a chance to review the drafts and the opportunity to correct any misunderstandings because IBM software is complex. So there's likely flaws in the report that are going to need deeper scrutiny and an explanation to perfect the report to get it just right. I've seen a lot of errors in audit findings, but I don't have a feel yet if these companies with a direct relationship are going to do more to help you than they do in like a point in time audit with IBM. If they're going to make suggestions for alternate licensing that's a better fit for your situation, kind of, the things I do, but I'm not the SAM partner, but sometimes depending on how you're using the software, another license metric could fit it, or a less expensive license from the same software family could be a better fit for your situation. And once the SAM partner completes all their work, they will be submitting the findings to IBM. And at this point, here's where you receive the advantages of participating in this program. Instead of being audited, you can purchase any license shortfall from your preferred IBM software reseller. There's no additional charge for back support like you would have in an audit. And that last selling point is you can purchase your licenses at your regular discounted RSVP rate. But I've always seen that offered for an audit settlement too, so I'm not sure that's really a perk for this program because it's you already get that in an audit. And your participation in this program will be ongoing. So even after that initial assessment, they'll keep reviewing it and updating it for you. It's not a once and done point in time like an audit. So IBM SAM partner will continue to assist with assessing your deployment of IBM software. So the catch is if you terminate your IASP contract, you can then be audited again by IBM. When they originally offered this in 2019, by mid-2020, the research has shown that less than 100 of IBM's clients had signed up for this. But I know of two recent audits where IBM suggested to the auditee if they hire an IASP, they could circumvent having a full audit. So anecdotally, there's indications that IBM is kind of offering the program to directly to customers that they've sent an audit letter to, but I haven't seen enough examples yet to know if this is really a trend of a selling program here or not. Even though this sounds like a great program, there's reasons why you may not want to do it, because all of a sudden you're paying for the expense. You're paying somebody that normally IBM picked up the price to audit you. Your confidentiality is at risk too, because they do communicate with IBM, but not initially. You might have security concerns, the perpetuity of this continually going on. If there's you break up with them if you don't hire somebody else, then you could be audited. And then these audit teams are not usually, there's licensing experts that might be in the back office, but they're not all on your account. So because IBM licensing is complex and there are not squads of licensing experts out there that know every nuance of IBM software, you may have realized yourself there's multiple metrics, migrations, different rules for similar products and versions. So there's no guarantee that you'll get the resource that knows your batch of products backwards and forwards, or the changes that have occurred now or occurred years ago. I see a lot of errors made during audits, and I've provided a lot of documentation from IBM to support the correction, but at times the auditor will wait until IBM tells them to correct the findings. But in the meantime, you need to keep a running list during an audit of everything that the auditor will not correct, doesn't want to hear about, and maybe I'm aging myself. You're an obsessive broken record until you reach the right person, and it might be IBM at the settlement point rather than the auditor fixing it. And these are not about IBM granting you a waiver, but the auditor not adhering to IBM's licensing rules or assuming the worst case scenario for you, but best case scenario for IBM. I'm really disappointed in them at times when I send over the IBM's language for an IBM product and they ignore it and won't even add a note to their findings that the audit victim doesn't agree. It's very disappointing because that's supposed to be their job. So that, again, just to go over each hidden danger, you're paying for the audit, and you're going to keep paying them to keep your whole environment under their watchful eye. And you may, hopefully, they'll work with you to do it when it's convenient for you to gather all the information, go through everything, and eventually, this is all going to steer business to IBM because you're always going to be buying licenses, even if there's, you're using it briefly, which you should buy them for, but they may not help you in finding the best fit to cover all your deployments. There's also an issue with, even though there's an NDA in place, there's going to be an exception that they'll occasionally report to IBM on your behalf. They at least have to let IBM know you're in the program, and your internal data could be exposed to both. All the details will be exposed to the IASP. Usually they just take a brief report and send that to IBM. They usually don't give them like IP addresses and all that. You also have security concerns because they're going to utilize scripts and scanning tools to analyze your product usage to save themselves the time and expense of doing it manually. These tools often report false positives and miscalculations, and the IASPs are reluctant to acknowledge that because sometimes it's just like a little piece of something in a directory name that to them needs a hit because they're using keywords. These tools are going to need exemptions for your firewall and security measures, and you should keep in mind that unfortunately it seems that Deloitte has had the bad luck with data breaches, but any of them could. And there's, with SolarWinds, Deloitte's one of their customers, so there's a lot of things that could be exposed. And even with the unemployment portals, it accidentally exposed home addresses and social security numbers. So there's been some unfortunate incidents. So when you're looking at the tools they give you, you got to review them for security viewpoint, that scripts you're given, look at the output. How is it collecting the data through your environment, whether it crawls its way into things you aren't responsible for, and they might think that you need to license it, or if it stops at a firewall and underreports, leading to a misrepresentation. So it goes both ways, that these tools don't work the way they're supposed to, or the way they're expected to. Another danger of this program is you're now in a continuous permanent audit with IBM, even though it's their partner doing it. They do use ILMT. If you have ILMT, that's great. But sometimes they're going to be, because ILMT and other tools are constantly running and reporting in every 30 minutes, if there's an accidental installation or unbundled components, you got to fix that right away. Talk to the IASP to get it, to explain the situation. So you're going to be constantly under this microscope. They also provide scripts to run in addition to SAM tools. So that's where you could run into trouble that they might have a disagreement. And also the tools themselves might misidentify things. And it's unlikely that you're going to catch it before the tool catches it or the script catches it. Sometimes you do, and sometimes even when you find it with the tool, it's hard to explain what happened because it could be an error, or it could be something that's very hard to detect what the problem is. Could be, I think recently I saw one with a Java archive file that was giving a false positive in identification. So there's a lot of detail there that they might not dig into to try to help you. And that's basically what it is, trying to help you not buy licenses you're not really using. Another issue is separation. Let's say you've done it a year or two, and you say, "Okay, I got it from here. I've learned a lot." You had the knowledge transfer. At that point, you could be still audited by IBM if you sever the contract. And there's the potential that ISP, while they were working with you, there may have been something in their findings that IBM could not necessarily use against you, because I have seen instances where IBM's been somebody's turned in somebody for like a bounty or something, but IBM will still do a point in time audit. They won't hold information they've gathered on the side against you. But it could, this relationship with the ISP could hurt you if you terminate the contract with them. With accuracy, it's not necessarily that everybody, there's such a wide breadth of IBM licensing that not everybody's going to know everything. So I've seen spreadsheet errors, which of course they'll correct if you can find it. But not everybody that you're going to be talking to is going to have the licensing experience or know everything about yours the same way you do. These are, excuse me, like all the accounting firms, their main business is not licensing or software licensing. They could have professional, but low-level recent hires handling the calls. It might be somebody that's reviewing it on the back end that knows the ins and outs of some of the older products. And then the compliance reports are oftentimes, they like ILMT, the tool, they're going to err on the side of caution. This is the worst case scenario, but if you don't have the wherewithal to like really dig into it, to say, well, I see what you're saying, but can you consider this? That finding's going to stand. That's unfortunately the case. They're always going to err on the side of caution, and the ILMT tool does that too. It's not sure, so it gives the highest number. Okay, now speaking of ILMT, this has been around a long time. It's IBM's license metric tool, and to get subcapacity licensing as opposed to full capacity, this is what's in the Passport Advantage agreement with IBM. That this, by default, everybody's been full capacity like they've always been. And for this example, I said, let's say I have two 20-core processors. I would need 2,800 PVUs. But by 2009, IBM offered in the Passport Advantage agreement subcapacity licensing to all its software customers. But the criteria was you need to install this tool within 90 days to get, once you first install a subcapacity product. You need to install it. You have to keep it reporting accurately. You have to keep patching it. If a version goes out of, gets sunset, you have to go on to the next version. You got to keep the quarterly reports on file locally for 2 years, and then if IBM asks for these during an audit, you have to present them. So, but there is a clear advantage here, even though you have all this extra work, is, let's say on this same server with two 20-core processors, I've only allocated 2 virtual cores. 2 times 70 is 140 as compared to 2,800. And some PVUs are expensive, the licenses. If you need hundreds of them and they're $500 each, that's a significant savings. In a virtualized environment, it's always advantageous to use subcapacity licensing. And the lack of if you wait until you get an audit letter, you will never have 2 years of back reports. It's not going to, you won't be able to argue that with IBM. They have no tolerance for that now. But one of the advantages of the IASP program, they said if you lack your 2 years of reports, they're going to help you and get that waived. But I'm not sure they're going to actually, they're not going to install it for you. They're not going to run it for you. That's more of an implementer job. So you got to keep in mind the potential that they could help. You might be able to hire them to do more for you or do more services or hire their partner to install it for you, but then still you have the security issues. So, you always want to be looking at these tools. And you also have to be careful because one of IBM's software resellers or implementers is installing ILMT for people. They're hired to do it. But then if they notice that you're short on licenses and don't buy the licenses from them, coincidentally, you might get an audit letter a short time later. And then the ILMT installer showed up again with this one company and said, I can make this audit go away if you do these things. And it's like, no, no, no. But they hired Miro, and the disconnect there was ILMT's only going to look at your servers and PVU licenses. And the shortfall they perceived was with Cognos, which you can also license with user licenses. So the end user had plenty of user licenses. They were fine. They went through their audit and they ended up with a 0 finding, but they were very worried until they got that audit resolution letter, because that reseller had gotten them so worked up with you need more, you need more, you need more. And for a fee, we'll make this go away for you. So that the threat was there because IBM did audit them. Okay. Now ILMT exceptions. In the past, ILMT is the only one mentioned in the Passport Advantage Agreement as the only accepted SAM tool, but you can always ask IBM for an exception. And Big Fix Inventory was IBM's, and they've been accepting it without a written exception because IBM just sold it to HCL last year, and the outputs and everything look very close to ILMT. But in the future, you might want to get, while you're talking to IBM, a written exception for that. And if you can't get a written exception, just try to get it in an email from IBM. But in 2017, Flexera's FlexNet Manager for IBM caught up to the ILMT level of monitoring with the agents reporting every 30 minutes. And at that point, IBM began sort of rubber stamping these requests for Flexera FlexNet Manager for IBM. So unlike ILMT, Flexera is not a free tool. It's a great tool, but it's not a free tool. So, you still have to get that written exception from IBM if you're saying, I'm going to use Flexera, I'm going to run these quarterly reports, and I'm going to keep them on file. You have to have that level of detail that's required, like they expect from ILMT. And then in late 2020, IBM added a couple more to the list of ones that they would give a written exception for: ServiceNow, Snow, and Aspera, that they'll make an exception for without too much hassle. And the reason for this is as enterprises deploy SAM tools in their environments or software asset management tools, it simplifies things to rely just on one tool rather than having a different tool for each software vendor. So if you had, ServiceNow or Snow, then you would need ILMT2 to get the subcapacity licensing. So this seems to be easier for IBM to work with their customers to say, if you're using one of these, ask for the exception and we will give it to you. But you always had the ability to ask IBM for a written exception to use other tools or another plan in lieu of using ILMT. It's just that ILMT is the one mentioned in Passport Advantage. So if you have no written exception, that's where you get in trouble. And there's been some confusion because these SAM partners of IBM says they can get this exception on your behalf, which is true, but you've always had the ability to get the exception yourself. You don't need to pay a middleman to go ask IBM for this exception. And the most important thing to note, though, for this for success with getting the exception is you need to take action prior to receiving an audit letter. You need to have it working in a similar fashion to ILMT with agents on all the servers, running reports. They have to be accurate. But you can't wait until you get an audit letter and say, oh, I better install ILMT to get subcapacity because you'll get caught. Because one of the questions that the auditors ask is, What version are you on? When was it installed? And please give us your 2 years of quarterly reports.
All right, thank you, Sharon. And I'll just quickly add, we're running low on time here. I will quickly add that whatever tool you use for subcapacity or to manage your environment, it's very important to know that the tool is great for gathering data if it can be installed correctly and is run correctly. But the tools don't know the actual rules, the licensing rules for IBM, which are complex and sometimes very counterintuitive. If you work with Miro, we have the option. We can work with your tool, but we can also work without one. So if for any reason you don't want to use a tool, either because you have security concerns or you don't want to pay for it, or you don't want to have a team that manages it, Miro can help you review your IBM licenses. And we don't need to use a tool, but we would be more than happy to work with you. And we have some of our own proprietary tools that we use. Otherwise, I do see we have a couple of questions, but I know that we're going to need to ask a few questions into your certain details of your situation. It's not, there's no cut and dry answer. So we're going to contact you after the event and get you a quick one-on-one session with Sharon, and we'll be able to answer any of the questions you may have with any follow-up. Otherwise, thank you for joining us. This concludes today's presentation. If you have any questions that you haven't asked and want to contact us, please email us at sales@miroconsulting.com, or you can call us at 732-738-8511, extension 1208, or visit us on the web at miroconsulting.com. Again, this concludes the webinar. Thank you very much and have a great day.